Aaron Vare did not shout when the seventh royal chef failed him. Shouting would have been easier to understand. Instead, the Alpha King of Alaris sat at the head of the blackwood table, staring at the untouched venison before him as if the steam rising from it carried death. The chef knelt 3 steps away, trembling so hard the gold chain at his neck clicked against the marble floor. No one moved, not the servants, not the guards, not Lord Malrek standing near the hearth with perfect concern on his face. Aaron lifted the fork, held it above the plate, and felt his throat close like a fist. His hand shuddered once before he set the fork down with careful restraint. "Take it away," he said. The chef shut his eyes, already ruined, and 2 guards escorted him out of Black Spire. 18 months ago, Aaron had been poisoned at a victory feast beneath the red eclipse. The poison had not only attacked his heart, it had damaged his alpha scent glands, weakening the command that made his bloodline feared across Alaris. Draven, the royal physician, had dragged him back from death, but survival had not restored what the poison stole. Since that night, every covered dish looked like a threat, every cup of wine like a trap, every polished plate like an invitation to die again while enemies waited for his throne to empty. He had tried to fight it. He ordered tasters, sealed kitchens, silver needles, oath-bound servants, and priests to bless every meal. Nothing worked. Even after another man ate from his plate and lived, Aaron's body still rejected the food before it reached his mouth. His alpha pheromone, once steady with cedar smoke and winter iron, had become unstable. Some days it faded until even beta servants dared to pity him. Other days it broke out violently, forcing omegas to their knees and making trained alpha guards lower their eyes. Both states proved the same thing. The king was failing. Lord Malrek used that failure with patient skill. He never claimed power outright. He merely accepted duties Aaron could no longer bear, signed documents the king was too exhausted to read, and advised generals until they reported to him before the crown. He spoke only of loyalty, order, and protecting Alaris until his majesty recovered. Yet every loyal word moved the empire a little farther from Aaron and a little closer to him. A starving king ruled from a dark chamber. A patient regent ruled everywhere else. Draven saw the truth more clearly than anyone. 3 mornings after the failed dinner, he came to Aaron's private rooms with his tonics and a face full of bad news. "Your body cannot live on sealed drafts much longer," he said. "They keep you awake, not restored. Your weight is falling, your scent glands are exhausted, and your alpha command is becoming unstable." Aaron stood by the window without his crown, his dark hair loose around a face sharpened by hunger. "Speak plainly." Draven hesitated. "If the High Council is called while you are like this, they can question your right to rule under blood law." Aaron's reflection did not change. And Malrek would accept permanent regency to save the empire. Draven lowered his eyes. "I did not say that. You did not need to." That same week, Elian Vale arrived at Black Spire through the Western Service Gate with a canvas satchel, 2 recommendation letters, and soil still caught beneath his fingernails. He was a 23-year-old Omega from a small valley village, hired for the Royal Herb Kitchen because he understood healing plants, broths, fever meals, and the old country recipes noble chefs ignored. Elian had no noble blood and no talent for flattery. What he had was a steady hand, a calm eye, and a memory full of his grandmother's lessons. How long to simmer bones, how to soften bitter roots with honey, and how to feed someone too tired or frightened to admit he was hungry. Roth, the captain of the Royal Guard, watched him sign the entry ledger. "You do not enter the king's wing unless ordered," he said. "You do not speak of what you smell or hear. You do not approach his majesty during a scent flare. If an alpha command drops, you kneel until it passes." Elian looked up. He was lean, quiet, and not easily shaken. "And if someone is hurt during a flare?" Roth paused. "Most new servants asked about wages or rooms. Then you call a guard. What if the guard is the one hurt? Then you call me." Elian nodded. "Where is the herb kitchen?" Roth studied him for a moment, then pointed down the corridor. Elian learned quickly that Black Spire was a palace built on caution. Servants whispered. Guards watched doorways. The king's wing felt like a place holding its breath. The herb kitchen, at least, could be made useful. He cleaned the hearth, sorted dried sage, washed moonroot, and stocked the shelves until the rooms smelled less like ash and more like bread, leaves, and warm water. On his 4th evening, while carrying jars to the lower pantry, he found the sealed drafts kept for Aaron, narrow glass bottles stamped with the royal mark, pale and lifeless. He read the physician's notes and understood at once. This was not food. This was survival measured in mouthfuls. 2 nights later, a storm struck Black Spire. Rain drowned the bells, and the palace withdrew behind closed doors. Elian stayed in the herb kitchen after his work was done. There were marrow bones, onions, carrots, barley, moonroot, sage, and a small cut of beef no royal chef would have chosen for a noble table. He told himself he was making supper for the lower staff, though even that sounded like an excuse. He browned the meat, let the onions darken, added moonroot after the broth took color, and shaped soft barley cakes the way his grandmother had taught him. Nothing elegant. Nothing courtly. Just food meant to warm a body from the inside. The scent traveled farther than he expected. It slipped beneath the herb kitchen door, down the passage, and into the king's wing, where Aaron stood over another sealed draft with his stomach clenched and his patience thinning. Beef, sage, toasted barley, and warm broth reached him all at once. Hunger struck so hard he gripped the table. For one dangerous moment, his body remembered what his mind had forbidden. Then suspicion followed. He left the draft untouched and walked toward the scent in a dark robe, bareheaded, with 2 startled guards behind him. Elian did not kneel when Aaron appeared in the doorway. His hands were full, one holding a ladle, the other steadying a bowl, and something in the king's hollow face told him that sudden reverence would only turn the kitchen into another room ruled by fear. Aaron looked taller in the low doorway, but hunger had carved him brutally thin. His alpha scent was present yet strained, cedar smoke buried beneath cold metal and exhaustion. The guards behind him looked ready to drag Elian away for breathing too boldly. "What is that?" Aaron asked. "Beef and moonroot stew," Elian said. "With barley cakes." "I did not order it." "No, your majesty." "Then why is it in my palace?" Elian set the bowl on the table and reached for another. "Because there was good broth going to waste, and because rain makes people hungry whether they admit it or not." One of the guards took a step forward, offended on behalf of the crown, but Aaron lifted one hand and stopped him. His gaze remained on Elian. "Do you know who you are speaking to?" "Yes." Elian filled the second bowl from the same pot, took a spoon, and ate without ceremony. The stew was hot enough to make him breathe through his nose, rich with marrow, sweetened by moonroot, grounded by sage. He swallowed, then tore a piece from a barley cake, and dipped it into the broth. "I am not asking you to trust me," he said after another bite. "I am letting you see there is nothing hidden between the pot and the bowl." Aaron's face hardened, not with anger alone, but with the terrible effort of a man holding back panic by force of pride. "You think fear can be solved with soup?" "No," Elian said. "I think hunger should not be punished because fear came first." The words landed too cleanly. Aaron looked at the bowl, the spoon, and the omega standing across from him with no scheme in his eyes, only the warm scent of honeyed sage beneath the steam. His hand moved before pride could stop it. He picked up the spoon. It trembled once, but Elian did not look at the tremor. He looked back at the pot, giving the king the dignity of fighting an invisible war unwatched. Aaron dipped the spoon into the broth and lifted it to his mouth. The taste was simple and alive: beef, root, salt, sage, barley, heat. Not courtly, not perfect, not poisoned. His throat tried to close, but the warmth had already reached him, and hunger demanded another mouthful before fear could argue. He ate again. Then again. The guard stayed silent. Elian kept eating from his own bowl, calm as hearthfire, while the Alpha King of Alaris stood in a small herb kitchen during a storm and remembered that staying alive was not the same as living. Far above the courtyard, Lord Malrek received the report before midnight. His Majesty had entered the lower herb kitchen and remained there nearly an hour with the new Omega attendant. Malrek dismissed the page, found the name on the duty list, and read it twice. Elian Vale. A starving king could be guided. A recovering one would start looking around. If that recovery had begun with an Omega from the herb kitchen, then the Omega had become a problem. By dawn, Elian was summoned again. Roth appeared at the herb kitchen door while he was washing the stew pot. His Majesty wants you here at 7th bell. To cook? Elian asked. Roth glanced at the clean hearth and the empty bowl drying near the table. He did not ask for cleaning. Elian nodded and reached for the eggs. Aaron arrived without a crown, but no one could mistake him for anything less than a king. Hunger had thinned him, yet command still lived in the way the guards shifted when he entered. He looked at the eggs, butter, barley bread, and sage broth waiting on the table. Something simple, he asked. Simple is harder to distrust, Elian said. One guard stiffened at the boldness. Aaron only watched him for a moment, then said, Cook. Elian cooked where Aaron could see every movement. He cracked the eggs, stirred them low with butter, and spoke just enough to keep the silence from turning hostile. My grandmother said eggs punish pride. Too much heat and they turn hard. Aaron's gaze moved from the pan to his face. Your grandmother spoke to eggs? She spoke to everything. Eggs listened better than children. Something almost softened at the corner of Aaron's mouth. When the eggs were ready, Elian ate first from the same plate, then set the fork beside Aaron. The king took it after a long pause. His jaw locked once, but he ate. Not easily, not cleanly, but enough. When he pushed the plate away, half of it was gone. Enough, he said. Enough is still food, Elian replied. Aaron looked at him sharply, but Elian did not lower his eyes. After a moment, the king stood. Same hour tomorrow. The routine formed from there. Every morning, Aaron came to the herb kitchen. Every morning, Elian cooked in front of him. Porridge with honey, bone broth with moonroot, barley cakes with butter, roast fowl folded into warm bread. Elian never promised safety. He offered proof instead. Clean hands, visible ingredients, one pot, one plate, one bite eaten before the king took his own. Aaron remained severe and dangerous, especially when a cent or silver utensil dragged him near old memory, but his eyes grew clearer. His voice stopped sounding dragged from the bottom of a grave. By the 7th morning, he was eating more than he left behind. By the 10th, Draven stood outside the herb kitchen staring at the king's color as if afraid hope itself might hear him. The palace noticed. Guards stopped exchanging grim looks over untouched trays. Servants no longer flinched at every draft from the king's wing. Aaron's pheromone, once jagged and unstable, settled into something deeper and more controlled. Cedar smoke and winter iron returned cleanly, no longer breaking through black spire like a wounded storm. Each morning, that alpha scent met Elian's honeyed sage without crushing it, and Roth, who had seen Aaron reject every kind of comfort for 18 months, noticed the difference with silent unease. Elian noticed too. When Aaron stood close beside the hearth, the king's scent pressed against his skin, heavy but controlled, and his own omega instincts answered before he could stop them. Honey, sage, and warm bread rose faintly at his throat. Aaron turned his head at once, aware of it. For a breath, neither of them moved. Then Aaron looked away first, not weakly, but with restraint. Your scent changes when you cook, he said. Elian kept stirring the porridge. So does yours when you stop glaring at breakfast like it betrayed the crown. The guard by the door stared very hard at the wall. Aaron gave Elian a look that had broken noblemen in council. It did nothing to him. Careful, the king said. I usually am, Elian replied. This time, the almost smile reached Aaron's eyes before he buried it. Lord Malrek heard all of this in fragments, and fragments were enough for a patient man. A king eating. A king sleeping. A king attending a treasury briefing without dismissing half the room. A king whose scent had begun to fill the upper corridors again, steadier by the day. Malrek received each report with composed approval, praised the staff for their devotion, and asked careful questions that sounded like concern. What exactly did the Omega cook? How long did the king remain in the herb kitchen? Was anyone else present? Had His Majesty resumed reviewing old military orders? Did he ask after the border accounts? The answers formed a shape Malrek did not like. A starving king could be pitted, managed, and eventually replaced under law. A recovering king would ask why certain ledgers had been sealed, why certain captains answered to the regent before the crown, why 3 border houses had pledged loyalty to Malrek's office rather than the throne. So Malrek went to see Elian himself. He chose late afternoon, when the herb kitchen was quiet and Aaron was occupied with Draven. Elian was cutting sage when the regent entered, dressed in dark green velvet, his silver hair tied back, his smile warm enough to fool anyone who needed warmth from men in power. Elian Vale, he said, as if the name pleased him. The palace has been speaking highly of you. Elian set the knife down. The palace speaks too much. Malrek laughed softly. A sensible view. I only wish to offer gratitude. His Majesty's improvement matters to all of Alaris, and you have provided a service beyond your station. I made breakfast. You gave the king back an appetite. Malrek stepped closer, not enough to threaten, only enough to make the room feel smaller. Such service should be rewarded. A safer post, perhaps. Better rooms. A place among the registered palace Omegas, where your future could be properly arranged. Elian looked at him and saw the hook beneath the velvet. My current room has a dry roof, and I prefer work that keeps my hands busy. You may not understand what is being offered. I understand enough to decline politely. Malrek's smile did not move, but something behind it cooled. Palace life can become difficult for an Omega without allies. Elian picked up the knife again and returned to the sage. Then I should choose them carefully. The answer was mild. It was also a door closing. Malrek watched him for another breath, measuring the calm shoulders, the lowered eyes that were not submissive, the scent of honeyed sage that seemed to linger in the room even after being ignored. Indeed, he said. Care is everything. He left with the same grace he had brought in, but by the time he reached his private study, grace had hardened into calculation. That night, a small black hawk left the west tower under cloud cover with a strip of thin vellum bound beneath its wing. The message was written in silver ink that appeared only above flame. It did not name Elian. Malrek was too careful for that. It read, "The sage in the royal garden must be uprooted before the High Council. Payment doubled if the soil remains undisturbed." The hawk crossed the outer wall, turned toward the old road, and never reached the man waiting beyond the forest. Roth caught it because he trusted patterns more than people. No bird was scheduled to leave that tower after dusk, and no loyal courtier used a hawk trained to fly low through rain. By midnight, the guard captain stood in Aaron's private chamber with a half-burned strip of vellum held between iron tongs. Aaron read the silver words once. The air changed so sharply that the candles bent toward him. Cedar smoke rolled through the room, dark, cold, controlled by a thread. Roth lowered his gaze but did not step back. "Orders, Your Majesty?" he asked. Aaron looked toward the lower corridors where the herb kitchen slept in darkness, where Elian Vale had no idea that the kindness of feeding a starving king had placed a blade above his own throat. When Aaron spoke, his voice was quiet enough to be deadly. "No one touches him. Not Malrek, not his men, not the High Council, not even fate if it thinks itself invited." He folded the secret letter with hands that no longer shook. At dawn, increase the guard around the herb kitchen. Quietly. And Roth, find out who was meant to receive this. Roth bowed. "And Lord Malrek?" Aaron's eyes lifted, clear and cold. "Let him believe I am still too weak to look behind me." Aaron told Elian the truth before breakfast. He did not soften it, did not hide it behind royal phrases, and did not let Roth speak in his place. Elian was setting a pot of barley porridge over the herb kitchen fire when the Alpha King entered with the guard captain behind him and a strip of burned vellum held between two fingers. The room smelled of toasted grain, sage, and damp stone. Aaron placed the vellum on the table. Silver letters shimmered faintly where the flame had awakened the ink. "The sage in the royal garden must be uprooted before the High Council." Elian read it once, then again, and the knife in his hand went still against the cutting board. "That means me," he said. His voice stayed calm, but his scent changed, honeyed sage sharpening into something greener, more guarded. Aaron heard the fear beneath it, and felt his own alpha instincts rise so violently that the fire bent away from him. "Yes," he said. "Malrek sent it." Roth intercepted the hawk before the message reached its buyer. Elian looked from the letter to Aaron. "And you are telling me because you want me to leave?" "No," Aaron said. "I am telling you because you have the right to know when a blade has been pointed at your back. Leaving is your choice, not my command." That answer unsettled Elian more than an order would have. He had been warned about Alpha Kings, about their possession, their pride, the way they wrapped concern in chains and called it protection. Aaron stood across from him with the power to lock him in a guarded room until the threat passed, and instead he offered knowledge, choice, and a silence large enough for Elian to stand inside. "If I leave," Elian said, "you will go to the High Council half prepared. I have ruled councils since before you were old enough to hold a kitchen knife. Not while eating before men who want to smell weakness on you." Roth looked down, because the sentence was rude enough to shorten a lesser man's life. Aaron did not move. Elian set the knife aside. "If Malrek wants me removed before the council, then he believes your recovery depends on me. He is partly wrong. You are the one eating. You are the one choosing not to break. But you still need practice under pressure, and we have little time." Aaron's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in attention. "What do you propose?" 3 trial feasts," Elian said. "Not breakfast. Court food, watched by men you trust, until your body understands that a table is not a battlefield unless you let it become one." The first trial feast was held that evening in the small winter dining room, with Roth at one side of the table, Draven at the other, and Elian moving between the hearth and the plates with the focus of a man who had no room for fear while the sauce was thickening. Aaron hated the room the moment he entered. Too much polished silver, too many candles, too much resemblance to the night beneath the red eclipse. His scent tightened around him, cedar smoke going black at the edges. Elian had expected that. He did not comment. He served roast fowl with moonroot cream, barley bread, and broth poured clear enough for Aaron to see there was nothing hidden in it. Then he sat down at the table himself with a smaller plate, ignoring Draven's startled look. "If this is practice," Elian said, tearing bread, "then let it be practice in company." Aaron's hand locked around the fork. For several breaths, no one spoke. Then Roth, who had understood the assignment with a soldier's blunt intelligence, said, "The western gate hinges need replacing." Draven blinked at him. "Now!" They shriek like dying geese. Elian almost smiled into his broth. Aaron ate 3 bites while listening to his guard captain argue about hinges, and by the end of the meal, half the plate was gone. The second feast was harder. Elian added 2 trusted officers and a ledger clerk who had served Aaron's father. More eyes meant more pressure, and pressure pulled the old poison memory close. The main course was venison, deliberately chosen, because the High Council would serve red meat whether Aaron feared it or not. When the plate landed before him, Aaron's pupils tightened. His alpha scent surged, striking the walls like a winter storm. One of the officers dropped his gaze at once. The clerk went white. Elian felt the command in it slam against his omega instincts, urging him down, urging him to bare his throat and yield. He did neither. He crossed to Aaron's side with a cup of warm broth and set it by his hand. "Look at the plate," he said quietly. "Not the memory. The plate." Aaron's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped near his temple. "Do not come closer. Then listen from there. You saw the meat cut. You saw the pan. You saw me taste the sauce. There is no gap for fear to hide in. You think words can leash this?" His voice was low, rough with the effort of holding back the flare. "No. I think you can." The room held its breath. Aaron closed his eyes once, opened them, and reached for the fork. He ate the venison 1 bite at a time, slowly, with sweat at his hairline and fury in every controlled movement. But he ate. When the plate was nearly empty, no one praised him. Elian had warned them not to. Praise would make the act feel like performance. Silence let it become fact. Afterward, Aaron left the dining room before anyone could follow. Elian found him in the east passage, one hand braced against the stone, shoulders rigid, his scent still too dark and too cold. "You should not be here," Aaron said without turning. "You say that often for someone who keeps sending for me. This is not wit, Elian." "I know." Elian stopped several steps away, close enough to be present, far enough to respect the warning. The alpha pheromone pressed into his lungs, heavy with command and pain. His own scent answered despite him, honey and sage warming at his throat, not submissive, not seductive, simply there. Aaron turned then, and the hunger in his eyes had nothing to do with food. His gaze dropped for 1 dangerous second to the side of Elian's neck, where the scent gland pulsed beneath skin. The air between them tightened. Aaron lifted his hand as if drawn by instinct older than language, then stopped before touching him. His fingers curled into a fist and fell back to his side. "I will not take comfort from you like a thief," he said. Elian's breath caught, not from fear this time. "I did not think you would." Aaron looked away, control returning by inches. "You should have." "Maybe," Elian said. "But I have been watching you too." The third trial feast changed the balance. Aaron invited 2 minor nobles who owed loyalty to the crown rather than Malrek, and Elian served a full council-style meal. Broth, fish, venison, spiced roots, barley cakes, and a diluted honey wine that Aaron only touched after watching Elian drink from the same pitcher. The table conversation was not warm, but it was real. Reports were discussed. Border taxes were questioned. Aaron corrected one noble's account of a military order from 6 months prior with such cold precision that Roth looked at him as if seeing an old blade drawn clean from its sheath. Elian stayed near the service table, not intruding, but he heard the shift. The king was no longer merely surviving the meal. He was using it. Every bite became proof. Every steady breath pushed Malrek's shadow back from the throne. While Aaron strengthened, Roth hunted. The burned letter had given him the route. The hawk had given him the tower. A servant with too much coin in his mattress gave him the next name, and that name led to Varric, a hired blade known for entering noble houses as a supplier and leaving before anyone noticed a death had occurred. By the third night, Roth had men watching every service road into Black Spire. Varric came near midnight under a wagon of winter herbs, carrying a forged seal, a curved knife darkened with poison, and a folded scrap of cloth that held Elian's scent. He made it as far as the corridor outside the herb kitchen before Roth's hand closed around his throat and slammed him into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The knife fell. The cloth slipped from his sleeve. Elian, who had been cleaning the hearth after the trial feast, turned at the sound and saw his own pale work cloth on the floor between two guards' boots. Aaron arrived moments later. No crown. No council robes. Only a dark coat, loose hair, and an alpha presence that filled the corridor so completely that every guard lowered his head. Varric, pinned against the wall, tried to smile through blood. I was only delivering herbs. Roth held up the poisoned knife. Aaron did not look at it for long. His gaze went to the cloth, then to Elian, who stood in the herb kitchen doorway with ash on one sleeve and his face too still. The king's scent turned lethal. Not wild, not broken, but focused into something colder than rage. Who paid you? Aaron asked. Varric said nothing. Roth struck him once in the ribs, efficient and ugly. Varric coughed, then laughed weakly. The regent sends his regards. The corridor seemed to shrink around those words. Elian stepped forward before the king could move. It was reckless, and every guard knew it, but he did it anyway, placing himself close enough that his honeyed sage cut into the edge of Aaron's killing scent. Aaron, he said, dropping the title because the man in front of him needed his name more than his crown. The king's eyes snapped to him. Elian felt the full weight of that alpha attention and held it. Not here. Not like this. If you kill him in the corridor, Malrek learns you moved before the council. Keep him alive. Make him useful. Aaron stared at him, breathing once, twice, then looked back at Varric with a calm, so sudden it was more frightening than the fury. Chain him below the east tower, he ordered. No one speaks to him but Roth. No one knows he was taken. At dawn, Malrek walks into the High Council believing his knife is still in motion. Roth bowed and dragged Varric away with two guards. The corridor emptied until only Aaron and Elian remained by the herb kitchen door. For a moment neither spoke. Then Aaron reached out, not to Elian's neck, not to the place instinct wanted, but to his hand. He covered Elian's fingers with his own, warm and steady despite the violence still hanging in the air. You should be terrified, Aaron said. Elian looked down at their hands, then back at him. I am. You do not look it. I am busy. Something in Aaron's face shifted, fierce and almost tender. He let go before the touch could become a claim. Tomorrow I take my throne back. Elian nodded. Then eat breakfast before you go. Aaron's mouth curved, slight but real. You give orders boldly for a man with no rank. I have a kitchen, Elian said. That is rank enough. And in the dark corridor outside the room where it had all begun, the Alpha King laughed softly, not because the danger had passed, but because something in him had finally remembered how to stand before it. Elian made breakfast before dawn because kings could take back thrones on an empty stomach, but Aaron Vare would not be one of them. The herb kitchen was quiet, guarded at both doors, with Roth's men posted far enough away not to crowd the room, but close enough to make the warning clear. Elian cooked eggs low over the fire, folded sage into warm barley cakes, and poured broth into a clay cup that had become Aaron's without anyone naming it so. The Alpha King entered in council black, his crown under one arm, his hair bound at the nape, his face sharper than it had been weeks ago, but no longer hollow. The difference was not softness. Aaron had never been soft. It was presence, the full return of a man who had stopped shrinking away from himself. He sat at the small table, not the carved chair the servants kept trying to bring him, and watched Elian set the plate down. No taster, Elian said. No taster, Aaron agreed. He picked up the fork and ate. Not quickly, not to prove anything, but with the settled certainty of someone choosing life because it belonged to him again. When the plate was empty, Elian did not praise him. He cleared the cup, wiped one thumb across a splash of broth on the table, and said, Do not let Malrek turn me into the argument. Aaron looked up. He will try. I know. He will say an omega from the herb kitchen made you weak, or sentimental, or unfit. He will make it sound as though eating my food means you are ruled by my scent. Aaron's expression went still and dangerous. He may regret using those words. Let him speak them, Elian said. Then answer as king, not as a wounded alpha. Roth, standing by the door, looked briefly at the ceiling as if asking old gods to admire the omega's nerve. Aaron leaned back, studying Elian with that focused gaze that made lesser men confess crimes. You give orders before dawn now. Only kitchen orders. This one reaches beyond the kitchen. Then obey it carefully. The silence that followed held no fear. Aaron's mouth curved faintly, but his eyes remained serious. When I return, I want you here. Elian met his gaze. I will be here because I choose to be. That answer steadied something in him more surely than any oath shouted in a hall. The High Council gathered beneath the iron banners of Alaris, where every noble house sent its strongest alpha, and every word carried the weight of blood law. Malrek stood at Aaron's left in Regent's Grey, calm and elegant, his face arranged into loyal concern. He bowed when the king entered, deep enough to satisfy protocol, shallow enough to suggest partnership. Aaron noticed. So did Roth. The old Aaron might have punished it with a glance. The man who had eaten breakfast in the herb kitchen let the insult breathe, then took his seat at the head of the table. 9 alpha lords lowered their eyes as his pheromone reached them. Cedar smoke, winter iron, controlled to a blade's edge. It did not crash over the hall. It did not beg for fear. It simply occupied the room, and every man present understood that the Alpha King had arrived whole enough to be dangerous. The ceremonial meal came before the petitions, as tradition demanded. Malrek had likely counted on that. He had chosen the order himself during the months when Aaron could barely stand the sight of covered plates. Silver dishes were brought in under seal. Venison in dark sauce, roots glazed with honey, black bread, broth, and diluted wine. The hall watched without appearing to watch. Aaron heard the small shift of sleeves, the quiet inhale from Lord Carden across the table, the patient stillness of Malrek beside him. He saw the plate placed before him and felt the old memory lift its head. Red eclipse, bitter wine, his lungs closing, men shouting through water, the crown slipping from his hand. The memory came. It did not rule him. Aaron picked up his fork, cut into the venison, and ate. No one spoke. The bite was warm, rich, and harmless. He took another, then bread, then broth. Each movement landed like a hammer, striking the false architecture Malrek had spent 18 months building. Aaron did not look at him. That would have granted the regent too much importance. He ate until the plate was nearly clear, drank from the council cup, and set it down with steady fingers. Only then did he lift his eyes to the table. "Proceed," he said. The word moved through the hall with quiet force. Several noblemen straightened. Roth, standing behind the king, allowed himself no expression, but the satisfaction in his silence was almost visible. The first matters were minor: border levies, grain routes, winter patrols, old complaints polished into new language. Aaron answered each one cleanly. He recalled numbers no one expected him to remember, corrected troop counts from the northern road, and rejected a proposed tax shift with the precision of a man who had seen exactly where the missing coin would settle. Malrek's smile held. Barely. He had expected weakness, perhaps stubborn pride, perhaps a flicker of panic when food touched the king's mouth. He had not prepared for this measured return, this calm dismantling of months of absence. So when Lord Carden rose as planned, Malrek let him. It was too late to pull the thread back. With respect to the crown, Carden began, which meant disrespect would follow. Several houses have concerns regarding the stability of direct rule. His Majesty's illness has been severe. His public presence limited. Certain decisions have passed through the Regency for the good of Alaris, and while all here rejoice at the king's improved condition, blood law requires more than sentiment. An Alpha King must command without dependency, without influence that clouds judgment. His gaze flicked, brief and ugly, toward no visible person, though everyone in the hall understood the target. There are whispers that a Palace Omega has gained unusual access. The council went cold. Malrek did not move. Aaron rested one hand beside his cleared plate. "Say what you mean, Lord Carden." Carden swallowed. The king's voice had not risen, which made it worse. "I mean only that the court must be certain His Majesty's recovery is not the result of scent influence, emotional manipulation, or private attachment beneath the dignity of the throne." A faint murmur moved through the lesser seats. Malrek finally spoke, soft and regretful. "No one questions His Majesty's strength. We only seek assurance that Alaris is not being guided from a kitchen by an unregistered Omega whose loyalty has not been examined." It was beautifully done. Loyal in tone. Poisonous in content. Aaron almost admired the craft. "Good," Aaron said. "Then let us examine loyalty." He lifted 2 fingers. Roth stepped forward and placed a sealed black folder on the table. Malrek's eyes flickered once. Not enough for most men to see. Enough for Aaron. Over the past year, While Lord Malrek carried the burden of regency in my name, several documents were altered. 3 military seals were used outside authorized channels, and gold from the Western Levy was moved through private accounts tied to House Malrek. The hall stilled. Aaron opened the folder. Roth intercepted a secret letter 3 nights ago. Written in silver ink. Sent from the West Tower by a hawk, not listed in palace records. The message ordered the removal of the sage in the royal garden before this council convened. He placed the burned vellum on the table, the silver words gleaming as if eager to testify. The intended target was Elian Vale, a royal herb kitchen attendant. The man hired to carry out the order was captured inside Blackspire last night with a poisoned blade and a cloth carrying Elian's scent. Carden sat down too quickly. Malrek remained standing, though the color had left his face by a careful degree. A grave accusation, he said. Against whom? Aaron looked at him then, and the room seemed to lean away from that gaze. Against the man whose seal paid Varric. Against the man whose tower sent the hawk. Against the man who needed me weak enough to pity and strong enough to keep the empire from tearing apart until he could inherit it without war. Roth placed a second packet before the council. Gold records, forged orders, intercepted notes, witness statements. Draven's testimony sat among them as well, not about politics, but about poison designed to damage an alpha's scent glands and make his rule contestable under blood law. Malrek had not brewed the poison. That much remained uncertain. But he had built his future upon its damage, and tried to preserve that damage by killing the one person helping Aaron heal. Malrek changed tactics because good traders always had more than one mask. He turned to the council, grief entering his face like an actor stepping into light. You are watching a sick king blame the man who kept his empire alive. Yes, I acted. Yes, I took burdens from him. I carried armies, led negotiations, answered desperate houses while his majesty hid from his own table. And now he returns with an Omega's scent on his clothes and calls stewardship treason. The insult struck the hall sharply. Aaron felt Roth move behind him and stopped him with one subtle hand. Then the king stood. He did not slam the table. He did not draw a sword. He simply released his pheromone. It filled the high council like winter descending over a battlefield. Not broken. Not frantic. Not the unstable flare of a wounded alpha lashing out in shame. This was command, old and absolute, cedar smoke and iron wrapped around every throat in the room. The alpha lords bowed their heads because their bodies knew before their pride could object. Even Malrek's knees threatened to bend, and he fought it so visibly that the fight became humiliation. Aaron let the pressure hold for 3 breaths, then drew it back with perfect control. That, he said quietly, is my answer under blood law. No one spoke. No one needed to. The law had heard him. Aaron turned to Malrek. Elian Vale did not rule me. He fed me. There is a difference, though I understand why a starving man recovering frightened you. A weak king made room for your ambition. A living one sees the furniture you moved in his absence. Malrek's mouth tightened. The last of his warmth died. A kitchen Omega changed the fate of Alaris? No, Aaron said. Your treason did. Elian merely gave me enough strength to notice. That landed harder than rage would have. Malrek looked around the table, searching for the calculation that had always saved him, but the lords had already begun withdrawing from him in small, fatal ways. Eyes turned away, chairs shifted, hands removed from the table space near him. Power rarely left with thunder. Sometimes it left as silence. Lord Malrek, Aaron said, you are stripped of regency, command, seal, and council voice. Your house accounts are frozen pending crown review. You will be held in Black Tower until formal judgment. Guards entered. Malrek did not resist. Pride kept him upright when chains closed around his wrists. At the door, he looked back once. His eyes did not go to Aaron. They went to the empty place where Elian was not present, because even in defeat he understood what had broken the timing of his rise. All this, he said, voice thin with hatred, because of a bowl of peasant stew. Aaron's expression did not change. Because you mistook decency for weakness. The doors closed on Malrek, and the High Council exhaled like men who had been trapped underwater. The rest of the session lasted 2 hours. Aaron did not rush through it. He settled border accounts, ordered audits, revoked 3 suspicious appointments, restored direct crown authority over the army ledgers, and made every lord in the hall speak plainly enough to be remembered. By the time he left, no one doubted who ruled Alaris. At Black Spire, he returned not to the throne room, but to the herb kitchen. Elian was waiting with broth, roast roots, and bread still warm beneath a cloth. He looked at Aaron's face and understood the ending before a word was spoken. "It is done," he said. Aaron sat. "It is done." Elian served him. Aaron ate everything. The quiet between them did not ask to be filled. Only after the plate was clear did Aaron speak. Malrek called it peasant stew. Elian's mouth curved. He would. Men like him fear anything they cannot tax, title, or control. He was wrong about the stew, Aaron said. It was not what changed the empire. Elian leaned against the table. Then what did? Aaron looked at him, unguarded in a way he had not been even during fear. You stayed. You were given every reason to step back, and you stayed with clean hands, sharp words, and soup hot enough to drag a dead man toward breathing. Elian lowered his eyes for a moment, not submissive, simply moved. My grandmother would say a hungry person should be fed. Your grandmother was wiser than most councils. 3 days later, Aaron made the matter official before anyone could twist it into gossip. Elian Vale was appointed royal hearthkeeper, given authority over the herb kitchen, palace recovery meals, and all food prepared for the king's private table. The title came with wages high enough to make Elian stare at the parchment, rooms with sunlight, and a small estate outside the southern gate placed under his name alone. This is too much, Elian said, seated in Aaron's study with the contract before him. No, Aaron replied. Too much is 18 months of men profiting from my hunger, while the only person who helped me eat was paid like a kitchen shadow. I did not do it for land. I know. That is why you can be trusted with it. Elian read the contract twice, asked 3 precise questions, and signed only after Aaron stopped smiling at how stubborn he was pretending not to be. That evening, after the palace had settled into a quieter rhythm than it had known in months, Aaron found Elian in the herb kitchen washing a pot. The room smelled of sage, bread, and clean water. No guards stood inside. No poison haunted the table. Aaron stopped near the hearth. I do not want you here because I appointed you. Elian dried his hands slowly. Then why? Because I choose you. Not as a debt. Not as a cure. Not as the Omega who saved a king and must now be folded into his legend. I choose you as the man who saw me starving and did not look away. Elian's scent warmed, honey rising beneath sage, but his voice stayed steady. And if I choose you back, what then? Aaron stepped closer, close enough that his cedar smoke curled around Elian without pressing him down. Then I ask before I take anything. Even what my instincts have wanted since the East Passage. Elian touched the side of his own neck, where the scent gland beat under skin. Ask. Aaron's breath changed. May I mark you, Elian? The question held no command. That was why it reached him so deeply. Elian looked at the Alpha King who had conquered a council that morning and still stood here waiting for permission in a kitchen. Yes, he said. Not because you are king. Because you are Aaron. The last restraint in Aaron's face broke into something fierce and tender. He cupped the back of Elian's neck with care, bent his head, and pressed his mouth to the place where honeyed sage gathered warmest. The bite was controlled, deep enough to bind, gentle enough to honor. Pain flashed, then heat, then a bond opening like a locked door finally recognizing its key. Cedar smoke, winter iron, honey sage, warm bread, all of it braided through the room until Elian gripped Aaron's coat and breathed against his shoulder. Aaron held him without crushing him, every alpha instinct transformed from hunger into vow. The next morning, Elian made eggs with butter, barley cakes, and broth touched with sage. Aaron sat at the small table, the mark at Elian's neck hidden beneath a soft collar, but felt in every quiet exchange of scent between them. The king picked up his fork without pause. He ate, finished the plate, and reached for the bread while Elian poured more tea. Beyond the herb kitchen, the empire moved under a restored crown. Malrek waited in Black Tower. The ledgers were being cleaned. The army had returned to direct royal command. Yet the truest proof of victory sat in a warm room at the heart of Black Spire, where an alpha who had nearly vanished from hunger ate without fear, and an omega with flower on his sleeve watched him with the calm satisfaction of someone who had never needed a throne to change the course of a kingdom. The empire stood. The kitchen was warm. The bond held.